This morning, the future of Texas politics really hinges on what happens Tuesday. A small number of Texas voters will decide runoff elections across the state. What does House Speaker Dade Phelan's re-election race look like, now 48 hours away? If elected in November, Donald Trump says he would consider Ken Paxton for U.S. Attorney General. Private property rights in Texas are not as strong as you might think. State Senator Paul Bettencourt on the bipartisan legislation to punish thousands of squatters all across Texas. Canada buys billions from this state, creating thousands of jobs here. Canada's ambassador to the United States makes a rare visit to Texas to reinforce that relationship ahead of the 2024 election. And hurricane season less than a week away, but Houston's still recovering from a random spring storm. Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis on what the state's largest city needs to be ready.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Hey, good Sunday morning to you. Thanks for being here this holiday weekend. Lots still happening politically this weekend. Campaigns are working through Memorial Day, trying to get the vote out for Tuesday's runoff elections. The biggest race in the legislature, of course, House Speaker Dade Phelan versus David Covey. If Phelan loses, school vouchers are likely to pass. In Dallas County, we're also closely watching the race for sheriff. Former Sheriff Lupe Valdez against incumbent Sheriff Marion Brown. The winner will get the job because there is no Republican running in November. If Donald Trump wins in November, he has said that he will consider Ken Paxton to be the U.S. Attorney General. Trump made the comments at the NRA convention in Dallas last weekend. He told KDFW TV that Paxton is, quote, a very talented guy. Paxton recently attended Trump's trial in New York, and he's one of Trump's biggest defenders, as you likely know. And in Austin, some pretty big changes to make that city more affordable. City Council reduced the size of lots for single-family homes. How does that help? There's only so much dirt, so if lot sizes are smaller, you can theoretically get more houses in each neighborhood. Austin City Council is also letting apartment buildings be built closer to single-family homes. It is something that other Texas cities are also looking at as well. Let's start this morning, though, with private property rights. They are not as strong as you might think here in Texas. Just to ask any of the thousands of homeowners anywhere in the state who've had to fight for months to evict squatters. Those are the people, of course, who move into your place when you're not there. Punishing them is now a top priority for State Senator Paul Bettencourt, a Houston Republican, who held a hearing this month to brainstorm potential new laws. Senator, welcome back to the program here. Texas has such strong private property rights. Why is it so difficult for property owners to kick out squatters when they're on their land?
Well, quite unbelievably, we don't have a definition for squatters anywhere in the Texas code. This is a much bigger problem than I thought. And for example, we had a national group come testify. There's 475 active squatting cases in Dallas-Fort Worth area alone. It means that we know from constable testimony, there's probably thousands in Houston and maybe up to 10,000 in the state. So this is a big undiscussed problem.
These squatting cases end up in civil court. Why isn't it criminal court?
Well, it's because the Constitution sets these property right cases up to the justice of the peace. Well, you know, to give you an example how bad the system has gotten, we had a testimony from one homeowner in Mesquite, Texas, who finally got to a JP and thought they would finally get their crackhead squatter out. But Justice of the Peace Margaret O'Brien, she said, well, I don't know what to do with the squatter. I'm not going to evict him over the holidays. So she let a squatter stay in Terry's home and not let her come back. That's how off kilter this system is, because we've let leftist progressive mantra dictate this coast to coast again. And this is the wrong answer. If you own your property, you own it. Squatters have no right to it. But we took testimony from her. We took testimony from a couple in San Antonio, the apartment association, people brandishing guns at, apartment owners. I mean, it's a zoo, and we're going to fix it.
To make sure I'm clear, what kind of changes do you think need to be made to state law after this hearing you held recently?
Well, look, for example, down in Southeast Texas, we had this big storm. We've got people who are still without power. Okay. Maybe they'll be out of power for 10 days. Well, great. They come back in and there's somebody squatting in their property. What do? So we're going to we're going to give substantial criminal penalties. We're going to make it easier for law enforcement to be able to automatically check with the appraisal district records to see who owns the place. Try to sort the wheat from the chaff and go to the JP court quickly, but with deference to the homeowner. See, the problem is we've let renters have a lot of help. They do. They get a lot of assistance from state and county folks, from cities about maintaining their rental capability because they're legitimate. But a squatter has no legitimacy, so they shouldn't get the same protections.
Last question for you here. The runoff elections are on Tuesday. Do you think that Senate Republicans and House Republicans will be able to work together next year after such a bruising Republican primary?
Well, there's always, tomorrow is another day, to quote an old movie line. And after a primary, people start to look at, well, what can they accomplish in the next session? And the only way to accomplish anything is for the House to pass a bill and the Senate to pass a bill. We proved that with the property tax bill, okay? Because that was the last point of cooperation. But I think that all things being resilient for the standpoint, we're elected to go do real things for real people in Texas. And on the Republican side, you have to look for conservative solutions for Texas challenges. So I think everybody's going to come together at that point, because that's what the taxpayers and the citizens expect. Not just the Republicans, the independents, the Democrats too. That's the way the system works. After a primary, everybody has to get back to work.
Senator, we appreciate the time as always, sir. Thank you.
No, anytime. We'll see you.
All right, let's bring in the roundtable to talk more about the politics of this. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I am Mitra with us from Austin at the Texas Tribune, and Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Bud, they come back together every session after these bruising primaries. This one seems different, though.
Well, there's so much anger within the Republican Party. There's so much bitterness, and there's still a majority of the House that's loyal to Speaker Phelan, and we'll see if he's back, who's reelected, who'll stay there. But, I want to talk about squatters, too, because this was an easy target for Paul Betcourt. Nobody's pro-squatter, but there are people who look out for tenants' rights. These cases are hard to figure out. You go into a house, they may be tangled up over a divorce, over a trust, over a deed. You can't tell who belongs there. It's like Graceland.
My thing is, this is not a new problem, man. This has been going on forever in this state. Why now?
Well, I think what you saw from the testimony of Senator Bettencourt's hearing is really kind of opening up some eyes too on some of what's actually happening with property owners being, essentially being kicked out of their, feeling like they're kicked out of their own house too. So, as Senator Bettencourt mentioned, there's bipartisan kind of action on this. So, there will be something, this is something where you probably will see something happen out of the next legislative session. It
sounds like it is one of the priorities for Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Bernadine, something both parties agree on this far out. Could it be a precursor to what we see in next legislative session? As you just said, this far out. I think that this is an easy issue, and one that not only majority of voters can get behind, but as bipartisan. But it does not, I don't think it's going to make any difference as to how well the lawmakers will interact or get along coming up the next session. There will be other issues, of course, Bud, that split them right down the middle, the GOP, even, the entire chamber. And they'll come back on vouchers and everything else, and we'll see the same kind of dogfights, and we'll see the Republicans eating their own once again. Indeed so. All right, a lot more ahead coming up, including this. When we come back here this morning, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis on that random spring storm that badly damaged Houston, and hurricane season, which starts at the end of the week. And why doesn't Texas talk more about Canada, our second largest trading partner? Canada's ambassador to the U.S. in Texas to change that. Inside Texas Politics, back in a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. Hurricane season starts in 6 days from now, but Houston is still reeling from that random spring storm a little more than a week ago. This morning, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis with an update on the recovery from that deadly storm and the lessons learned. Commissioner, good to see you again. I hope things are going well. Let's start with it. How are you and your constituents doing right now after the storm?
I'm lucky. I didn't lose power at my house, but about 900,000 buildings, homes and buildings lost power in Houston.
And, Houston is so resilient with all it's gone through, the hurricanes it survived. How in the world did this random spring storm paralyze the city so badly and Harris County so badly?
Well, a derecho is something that we are not accustomed to in this region. We're not accustomed to tornadoes at all in Houston. So imagine almost 1 million buildings losing power. People couldn't prepare because you don't know it's coming. People weren't stocked with water, batteries, other essentials. It was just an incredible strain that it put on us. You're talking about 5:30. In 30 minutes, it wreaked havoc on a major metropolitan area in America. Damage assessments, these are early assessments, $5 to $8 billion. Now compare that with Harvey. If my memory serves me correct, it was about $125 billion statewide. I'm not sure what our figure was in the Harris County region, but there's really no way you could anticipate this coming. So to happen so quickly, we got to look at, having a stronger standards on building to prepare for events like this that are unanticipated. Obviously, it would help with hurricanes, but we're not accustomed to this.
Sure.
In this region.
Commissioner, I don't need to tell you, but hurricane season starts on Saturday, June the 1st. Is the county, is the city going to be ready?
We will be ready for what we have seen in the past. We've never had an instance like this where 2 tornadoes hit and run in a straight line through certain areas of the city. But we're going to have to make ourselves even more resilient. We've done a lot since Harvey. Remember, it was not a hurricane. It was not a rain event.
Right. This
was 2 tornadoes we know about. And when you can tear down these oak trees in Houston and Harris County, that's pretty amazing. So look, we're going to be ready for what we've seen in the past. What we cannot say we're ready for is what has never happened before.
Commissioner, we'll be thinking about you guys, so hang in there, and best of luck to you. Good luck to you.
Thank you. I appreciate your support.
If you've watched this program before, you've likely heard us talk about Mexico being this state's largest trading partner. Any idea, though, what country comes in second place? It's our quiet neighbor to the north, Canada. Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, made a rare trip to Texas in hopes of reinforcing that relationship and growing it. Madam Ambassador, welcome to Texas here. When many people in this state think of foreign trade, we think of Mexico, we think of China, but Canada is our second largest trading partner. Why is Canada so low profile about that?
Well, that's a really good question. That's one of the reasons that we're here is to make sure that we can highlight that the Canada-Texas relationship, it's huge, it's growing, it is getting a lot of attention, but it clearly needs to get more, because when something's good and it's growing, we want to make sure we're keeping on the upward trajectory. I'll be honest with you, Texas is the #1 export state to Canada. In other words, your state exports more to Canada in terms of goods than any other state in the country. And those exports are actually giving rise to about 900,000 jobs in the state. So it's not a small thing. It's a big thing that makes a big difference for a lot of Texans. And we want to make sure that, that we're profiling that.
And you have a lot of meetings lined up here with Governor Abbott and a number of business leaders, I presume. What's the main message that you want to send to them with your visit here?
Yeah, what we want to say is exactly this, that the relationship between Canada and Texas, the economic relationship, is robust, it's growing, it supports a lot of really good jobs in the state. It supports a lot of really good jobs in Canada too, obviously in our huge energy sector, but across the economy, in agriculture and manufacturing and automotive. And so let's take a look at that. Let's see what's working right, and let's double down. When we go see the governor tomorrow, we're taking 5 companies with us. And these 5 companies alone have invested over $20 billion in Texas, and there's more coming. And that's just 5 companies. We have over 800 companies from Canada investing in operating here in Texas. So that's our message. Our message is it's a super strong relationship. It is likely less understood than it should be. And so let's focus on it and let's grow it.
Prime Minister Trudeau announced this U.S. tour for Canadian officials earlier this year in January, I believe. I'm curious, though, how much of it is related to the upcoming November presidential election here in this country and shoring up relationships so that Canada is going to be fine regardless of who's elected?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is Canada is going to be fine regardless of who's elected. Elections generally are important, right? Because there is a presidential election, but obviously I'm in Washington, D.C., and every single member of the House is up for re-election. A third of the Senate is up for re-election. 11 governors are up for re-election, or 11 governors or states are having gubernatorial elections. So we need to have strong relationships with all of those people. So my team in Washington and then our team all across the country is busy working on that. And yes, of course, what happens in the White House matters. But I actually was appointed under President Trump and worked with his administration for 2 years. And we worked really well together. We renegotiated the NAFTA together, incredibly successful negotiation. We worked really closely together in the early days of COVID when we had to put some restrictions on our land border. Very successful. So I have every confidence that we will have a successful relationship should former President Trump be elected again. And I think we're just really wanting to remind everybody about how much it is that we do together, and let's make sure, as I say, that we're building on it.
Ambassador Hillman, thank you for the time. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
The Roundtable is standing by when we come back here on Inside Texas Politics. All right, time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Bud, Berna, and Ian back with us here on the Roundtable. Bud, let's start with you. Texas Republicans talking about closing their primary elections. That means you'd have to register as a Republican long before the primary election, so you just don't show up and ask for a ballot for your party. What's the point in that?
Well, Republicans are looking at primary results, and they see that about 4 to 6% of the Republican primary voters have some sort of Democratic voting in their past. They may be people who are voting in that particular primary for a candidate. They may be people who've chosen to become Republicans. But the Republicans say, we want only people who are longtime Republicans. Under one version in the convention, you would have to register the November before in order to vote the Republican primary.
And of course, other states have this as well. Is it a good idea, long range, when you're talking about the growth of the Republican Party?
Yeah, a majority of states, more states have it than don't. But, it kind of depends on the outlook. It really does kind of, for Republicans, it could be something where they really feel like that there's specific, people voting in the primaries. But there's also the flip side of, for some who have concerns that this may feel like it doesn't open themselves up to other people to join into the party. And it could close off independents who may be voting there, too. So that there's both ways to look at it.
Well, why the talk about this, Bernadine?
Well, I think that, during the primary, because we're in the runoff now, you had some of the races where the Republicans felt that Democrats helped run those races into runoffs, or for example, down in East Texas with the money, with that race. But
that was a special election. It wasn't a primary.
I understand, but that's when the talk started.
Right.
But you also have to wonder, the Republican Party, instead of reaching out, growing the party, it seems as if they're always trying to change the rules. You looked at the straight ticket voting, but if that's what they want, that's what they want. But I'd also like to point out, what does it do about the Democratic Party? Does the Democratic Party have to go into a closed primary? And I don't think so. But I think that will raise the issues of what happens to the Democrats.
And Bud, you were talking about the numbers there. 4 to 6% can easily swing an election, and that's what some Democrats, some independents try to do.
Swing a primary, and then what you'll see more independent voters will go vote in the Democratic primary because the Republican is closed. Might pull the Democrats to more moderate candidates at 5 to 6%.
What happens, though, to the independent voters?
Well, the independents, they show up, they vote in the Democratic primary, and then the Democrats have a bigger turnout. And the Democrats give money based on how many people vote in the primary. States get money based on the total primary vote, so the Democrats will get more money out of this.
We're 48 hours out from the Tuesday runoff here. Let's talk about the final hours for Dade Phelan. How do you think it's looking?
I mean, it always comes down to turnout, and we're also talking about a time where school's out, people are starting to go on vacation. It's not exactly going to be a high turnout situation. Runoffs rarely are. So, with Phelan, he's gotten some support from folks like former Governor Perry, former Speaker Strauss and Bonin. He's really counteracting a lot of the statewide, support for his opponent, David Covey, whether it's Dan Patrick, or other Ken Paxton or others. So it's really just going to come out who's got the message. There's and who's really kind of turning out.
And of course, Bernadine, it's the day after Memorial Day when this election happens. What do you think happens?
Absolutely, but keep in mind that the conventional wisdom is that low turnouts favor the incumbent. And then we also see a number of the the current state representatives going down there trying to save him. But I think that it's going to totally depend upon who can get their voters, or which voters are determined to go to the polls to elect their candidate.
The early voting is much higher in Jefferson County. Those are going to be Phelan voters. This race is going to be closer. He's run a better campaign. I'm not sure he'll come all the way back, but he'll make it a close race.
But the last race, the primary race, March 5th, I mean, it was just a few points away. It was single digits.
You had a third-party candidate, too, who's endorsed Covey.
Yeah.
And
not a third party, but a third candidate.
An independent candidate.
And as we said, runoffs. Runoffs, there are those committed voters who want their candidates to win, and they're more likely to get back to those polls. So it's going to determine those voters as well as the turnout.
And who shows up, indeed.
Yeah.
So, guys, thanks so much. We appreciate you watching as well. We're back next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Hope you enjoy the 3-day Memorial Day weekend. Take care.